I'm going to go first because I came up with this. I didn't give you guys time. I don't want to put you on the spot immediately. And I want to be running out of the gates with my opinion. So here is the matchup that I am most interested to watch on Wednesday and Thursday. It is Nnamdi Madubuike against Blake Brandel, because Blake Brandel is currently the Vikings center. And Blake Brandel, the Vikings have believed in for some time. Going back to the spring, Kevin O'Connell and this offensive staff talked about, we believe that with an offseason dedicated to one position, and because of how smart Blake is and because of how athletic he is, he can manage this spot. Throughout practice over the first 3 weeks of training camp, there have been too many, snap issues, snap exchange problems for my liking. And now you're going up against a guy who, if healthy, in Nnamdi Madubuike, is one of the best interior defenders in the NFL. So, Garrett, I'll kick that over to you before you give an opinion. I want to hear Coller's thoughts on it too before he gives his opinion, because I just think that this is another huge conversation. Besides safety, besides edge rusher, the center spot right now warrants conversation. What do you think, Garrett?
I couldn't agree more. And I'll get to my position battle in a minute. I was worried that you were going to take the one that I had off the top of my head, but no, Blake Brandel, Nnamdi Madubuike, this is a player with question marks at the position versus one of the best in the league. So how are you going to do in those situations? And it also really applies to the Minnesota Vikings this year because of, Kyler Murray's size more than would in other years. Because if Blake Brandel's getting walked back regularly into Kyler Murray's face, that is extremely that's unadvantageous or disadvantageous for Kyler every single play to deal with whenever a guy with the power and with the ability of Nnamdi Madubuike that is constantly in his face. Even if Nnamdi Madubuike never actually touches Kyler, he finishes the game with no quarterback hits. But if he can constantly get the backfield, disrupt the play, disrupt the timing of Kevin O'Connell's offense, that's a problem. And then breaking news, Nnamdi Madubuike is not going to be the only good defensive tackler that Blake Brandel's going to have to face this year. So that's a great matchup because that could be an Achilles heel for this team throughout the 2026 season.
I should also say, they also have Travis Jones, I believe, who is a different body type. And so, frankly, to get to see Madubuike against Blake Brandel, who's a little more of a twitchy player, and then Travis Jones, who probably has more power. For me, I just think the evaluation for Blake Brandel, Collar, how do you feel about what we've seen from Blake Brandel so far?
Yeah, I was going to mention Travis Jones because I just pulled it up here. He had 6 quarterback pressures at 340 pounds against the Vikings last year. So that was a pretty favorable matchup for Travis Jones. So those two guys, their interior is really great. The way that I looked at Brandel was the first 2 games that he had to play. Hey, man, can you just play center against the Cleveland Browns and the Philadelphia Eagles, the 2 maybe toughest teams in the league to play center against to start where you were going in your career at center? That's really, really hard for him. The rest of the season, it was okay. He was probably a mid-pack type of center where, there were some bad losses mixed in there, but his communication was pretty good and the snapping was not a huge issue outside of that hilarious one against, I think, the Eagles where it flew over his head when Carson Wentz was playing quarterback. But during this training camp, the snapping issues are very real. When you get to the point where almost every single day you're seeing either one go wide, or the other day we saw one bowled back to the quarterback, you're like, this is hard enough to do when you have perfect snaps for someone to play with rhythm and timing in Kevin O'Connell's offense. If you have them going left, right, and on the floor, that's not going to be very acceptable. So that has to be different when they get to the regular season. I think if that's okay, then it's maybe average to slightly below average pass blocking. I am not convinced about him as a run blocker at his size, getting out of the stance, getting moving. But, I think they've got a lot of really, really good run blockers on the offensive line that can make up for some shortcomings there. It just comes down to, can you snap it? And people ask, who should they go get? Is there another center? And you're
exactly.
Dude, this is the hardest position in football to replace. I really think it is. There are probably 5 guys. Look at what Linderbaum made in free agency. There's 5 guys who can do this, and they're incredible. And then there's another 10 who you can survive with. And then there's probably 10 more that you wish you weren't playing. So which category can you be in? Can you be in the middle category where you could survive with, and the rest of the O-line is the potential to be great? But if you're in the bad category, it's really tough to cover up for that guy. So I think I'm not as concerned about Brandel as an actual blocker or communicator. It's really just get the ball back to the freaking quarterback.
Yeah, the other thing with it is like, oh yeah, let's bring in somebody from the street who doesn't know this offense with 2 weeks to go, working with a quarterback who is also still getting up to speed in this offense. Like that just feels like a recipe for disaster. And I will say, to your point, Coller, and that, like the way you explained it there, people have asked, like, what was the intent behind, why didn't they sign a Cade Mays or a Luke Fortson or draft someone early? And while I do think some of those were definitely discussed internally, the reason the Vikings rolled with Brandel was because of his understanding of the system and because the difference between a lower level center free agent acquisition and what Blake Brandel might be able to give you. I think the belief internally was that there wasn't a gap there worthy of major investment. So whether that plays out, we will all find out together. But I do think it's a sensible kind of feel. All right, Garrett, that was a lot for my opinion. So hopefully you liked it, Coller. I mean, do I get the approval?
Oh, heck of an opinion. I mean, we spent half the show on it, so It really was a great take.
No, I appreciate it. Garrett, all right, your position matchup in these joint practices that has you that will have you attuned to what's going on.
I love seeing rookie on rookie matchups, especially in the trenches. So we're going Ravens first round pick Vega Wane versus Caleb Banks / Dominique Orange. I want to see because there's going to be like Caleb and Dominique are going to get their reps interchanged and everything. So I can't wait to see, or their chances rather, against Vega. I can't wait to see the big boys brawl it out. Can't wait to see who comes out as a winner, because Vega Wane was regarded as a much higher prospect at his position than Caleb and Dominique Orange were at theirs. And he was a player that some people had as a legit top 5 or top 7 player in the class. So this is going to be a big test for those guys. How do you match up against a player that is expected to be one of the best at his position by probably the end of the 2027 season, a player that I thought very highly of as the guard coming out of Penn State this year. And I love seeing those big boys absolutely brawl it out. And I can't wait to see or hear the reports that we have from little 2026 draft class on 26 draft class.
The hard part, Coller, about these joint practices, and this is inside baseball, but like what I would do for the film of these practices,
yes,
that's the hard. Like I can try to watch, you're trying to see all of it, and it's just so complicated to get a feel for every, all of the matchups. So that's the stress, Coller, of what's been on my mind on this Tuesday afternoon. It's like, is my mental processing good enough to see as much as I'm going to need to be able to see? I don't know.
Maybe if we just ask nicely, they'll just email us all the film from the games.
There's no doubt about it. Yeah,
I think so. For me, it is Kyler Murray versus Jesse Minter, because Jesse Minter is installing a new defense. And I would expect, even though there are fans who are going to be filming from up top and tweeting out a lot of the practice, I'm sure. But I think that he is going to be throwing some stuff at the Vikings offense, because he's trying to get a lot out of these practices as well when he's installing a new defense. And here's Kyler Murray learning an entirely new offense and facing an opponent really for the first time. We cannot call what happened against the Giants facing an opponent. That was a couple of handoffs, and maybe, try to get on the same page with Aaron Jones next time and go hit the showers. This is going to be 2 very, very hard days of practice for Kyler Murray against a defense that has a lot of star talent on it. It was a major disappointment last year, which is even more emphasis, I'm sure, for Minter. Hey, I'm the new coach. I'm turning around this defense. Here we go. So I think there's going to be a lot of energy from the Ravens coming into these practices against Murray, and it will be maybe the best test we've seen so far of how far along he is with the offense. But I do want to throw it out there that we may have overreacted to some joint practices last year when the Vikings were clearly the better team than the AFC representative for the Super Bowl. So let's not go too far with anything.
It is interesting.
The next 2 days.
It's interesting, Coller. As you're talking about the Ravens defense, I'm looking at the depth chart just because you